Hello everybody, this is David Panouche. Welcome to another online video lecture for Robert Wright's The Moral Animal in my class Social Psychology at Edmund Burke School. Today we're going to talk about families and what the evolution of the emotions and the behaviors that tie families together and how that can be explained. So we start off with our furry friends, the squirrels. So you've got cute little red squirrels hopping around and living their lives, gathering up nuts and trying to, save for the winter. And then you've got predators, birds, hawks, and eagles and things flying around trying to swoop down and pound little bunny squirrel foo-foo on the head. So some squirrels, let's say, have a gene, and there's not really a single gene, but let's just assume for the case of simplicity that there's a gene that predisposes some squirrels to, when they see the predator, make an alarm, sound an alarm, which will save the other squirrels from getting killed. And then some squirrels don't have this gene. So the squirrels are running around, and when they see the predator, they go, wah, 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 wah. And I'm not sure if that's exactly how it sounds, but squirrels do make some crazy noises. So the squirrel makes the sound, and fewer of its friends and family who are around will get killed in the process. So the question is, why? Why, when we think of evolution as demanding that you survive, first step towards reproduction, would a squirrel draw attention to itself, and which makes it more likely that it's going to get killed because it's making noise and it's standing up and drawing the attention of both the other squirrels in the area, but also the predator who's coming in to kill it. Why would a squirrel die? How does that help it survive and reproduce just to save its buddies? And if you're looking at evolution from an organism point of view, it doesn't make any sense. This squirrel dies, that's no good for this organism, that doesn't make sense. So evolutionary biologists were puzzled by this, and people who saw this sort of behavior also questioned Darwin's theory at first. The answer comes in 1963 from a gentleman, a biologist named William Hamilton, and essentially it boils down to this. If a gene appears that makes its vehicle behave in ways that help the survival or reproductive prospects, remember our biological agenda, survive and reproduce, of other vehicles, and vehicles just another word for organisms, that are likely to contain a same exact copy of the gene, then the gene may thrive even if prospects for its organism are lowered in the process. So in this case, if the squirrel can assume that there's a single gene that compels the squirrel to give the alarm. That's an organism. Assume that this gene is present 50% of the time in squirrels. Assume that the squirrel, even though it dies, usually saves more than two siblings or parents, closely related squirrels, who each have a 50% chance of having the same exact gene. So we know the squirrel that sounds the alarm dies, boom, predator eats him. But looking at the probability, if generally speaking about 3 of its siblings survive, then 1.5 copies of the gene survive in this interaction. 1 dies, 1.5 survives. That's good from the gene's perspective. And that is how the genes that seem to be causing harm to the individual organism can actually become more present in the population over time, and how they've evolved. And this is called kin selection, because you're more likely to share genes with the people that you are actually related to. So a kin is a member of your family. And so these kinds of behaviors you would think would also evolve similarly along with behaviors or cognitive mechanisms that help you distinguish kin from non-kin. Because, go back to our example, if you're less related to the people, then they are less likely to have the gene, or the other squirrels. If you're saving squirrels that don't have the alarm call gene, then the alarm call gene dies out when you die. But if you're closely related, they're more likely to have the gene as well. So I want you to sort of pause the video at this point and think, how do organisms who can't talk necessarily in any language the way we can, how do they distinguish between kin and non-kin? Because again, if you can't distinguish between kin and non-kin, you would expect that this sort of behavior would not evolve, because it doesn't pay off if there aren't other copies of the gene nearby or in the organisms that you're saving or helping. So the second thing I want you to do while you're pausing the video and pondering is think about what drives the behavior. Remember that in our class, when we talk about organisms behaving a certain way, they're not doing analysis, they're not thinking logically or rationally, they are feeling things and then acting. So the question to ponder is, what are the emotions that are going to drive the behavior of this sounding an alarm, of this helping another out at the expense or cost to yourself? So how do we figure this out? Well, biologists have something called R, little r, and it's a measure of the degree of relatedness between two organisms, and it measures the genetic material beyond that which is shared by every member of the species. Keep in mind that most of my genes are exactly the same as most of your genes. All the variation within our species happens in a very small percentage of our total genetic, of our total genome. So when we talk about R as a measure of relatedness, and we say it's half for siblings or parents, we're not saying that I share 50% of my genes with my siblings or parents, because as a human being, I share over 99% of my genes with my parents and siblings. I share over 99% of my genes with you, like it or not. But the 1/2 refers to, of that little percentage that is a variation from organism to organism between the species, we share, if it's a sibling or parent, we share roughly 50% of those genes. And that's a heck of a lot more than I'm likely to share with a complete stranger from a genetic standpoint. And remember that we're competing on the variation. We're competing on what makes us different, not what makes us exactly the same. So if you're thinking about it, for siblings and parents, we're likely to share 50% of this difference of our genetic material. For a half sibling, because we only share one parent, or a niece, or a nephew, or an aunt, or an uncle, or a grandparent, it's all the same. It's 1/4, or 0.25. And for first cousins, it's 1/8. So R helps us when we go back to the altruistic behavior. When does it pay for the squirrel to sound the alarm? Well, it pays when the cost to the giver, in this case, a squirrel sounding alarm, is less than the benefit to the receiver, saving some lives, or multiple receivers. You could say, you could put an X in front of the B if there's multiple receivers, right? Multiplied by the degree of relatedness, because that is less than 1. It's going to cut it down. So, this is where we get that idea that the squirrel alarm call generally on average has to save more than 2 siblings or parents. That's the R. So 2 times 3, 2 is the benefit, times 3, it's going to be more than the cost to my life, which is 1, so 1 is less than 1.5, then it makes sense to be nice. Generally speaking, if the cost to me is less than the benefit to you, times in some way or multiplied in some way, factored through how related we are, then it pays for me to be nice to you over time. And when I say it pays, I mean evolutionarily. It helps the survival and reproduction of this particular genetic predisposition to do the nice behavior. And again, just a reminder, this is driven by emotions. I'm not sitting there saying, well, let's see, does it pay for me to buy lunch for my brother? Well, the cost to me is $8, and the benefit to him is $8, but he's related to me. No, we're not doing that, okay? We're not thinking that way. We just feel, I like my brother. He's a great guy. I want to buy him lunch. So we do the behavior. The reading ends with another very important concept, which is just to understand what happens when R is large. What happens when R is more than 1/2? What happens when R is 3/4? Or what happens when R is 1? In that case, we are sharing more than this small variation of genetic material with other organisms. And what we see in those species is more and more altruistic behaviors. So social insects like bees, ants, termites, I guess other social animals like naked mole rats, they're very, very helpful to one another, and we get that because of the fact that they share so much genetic material. Slime molds, I think the author talks about slime molds. Slime molds actually share 100% of their genetic material with each other. So R equals 1 for slime molds. So what slime molds will do is they'll get together in a pack, so to speak, or in a blob. I don't know, never seen a slime mold, but I'm imagining it's slimy and moldy. And literally, the slime molds on the outside of the glob will kill themselves, and in their death, they turn into a hard protective coating that protects all the other slime molds inside. So that is a completely altruistic behavior, total sacrifice, and it makes perfect sense because the slime mold on the outside, by saving millions of slime molds on the inside, totally benefits from a genetic standpoint because it's all the same genes. Similarly, conceptually, if you think about it, all the cells in our body give themselves up and die. The only cells that get reproduced are sex cells. So somewhere along the line, in terms of evolution, how do you get a multicellular organism? It's cells that all share the exact same genetic material working together in complete altruism to form a larger organism. So it's the same concept. So as usual, you should read the book. You should answer the questions. You should ask me if you have questions. And I hope this was helpful.